Welcome to the Pocket Hole Solution to Cabinet Making. The project featured in this video will provide you with a solid foundation of assembly skills needed to build a variety of cabinet shapes and sizes. We're confident that after watching this video, you'll be able to create your own custom cabinets for the shop, office, bathroom, or kitchen. If you're looking to build your own custom kitchen cabinets, Craig offers a book set that outlines standard dimensions and building practices for framed kitchen cabinets.
After the next few minutes, and with a little imagination, you too will be able to create a wide variety of cabinet styles, shapes, and sizes simply by learning how to use this Craig K2000 Pocket Hole jig. This is the Craig K2000 Pocket Hole Jig, and this is the bathroom vanity cabinet I made using the Craig Pocket Hole Jig. Hello, I'm John Salotes. During the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you how easy it is to build a cabinet like this one using the Craig K2000. Since I discovered the Craig Pocket Hole Jig, I just can't stop using it. It's fast, there's no time wasted clamping or waiting for glue to dry, it creates strong, precise joints, and it's simple to use. As a matter of fact, all of the joints in this cabinet were made with this Craig jig, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to create these fast, strong, and simple joints. Joints like the face frames, adding the gables, even doing stile and rail doors, building the boxes for drawers, and bullnosing to the countertop surface. Let's go out in the shop and get started. Now the first part is to assemble the frame, but you also have to include the legs in this. When I cleaned up the leg here, I made it 1 9/16 by 1 9/16. Now the reason for that is that I want to make sure that I've got a bit of room here to sand down and clean up in case I get a rough cut on the saw. The next thing, once I've done that, I've also taken it and I've made it 35 1/4 inches, because once I put the 3/4 inch top on here, that's going to give me a 36-inch high countertop. The legs themselves, well, this little profile on the bottom here, what I've done is I've taken a template, made myself a jig, and drawn out this template so that each time I cut this out, I'm going to be consistent with it. I run it through the first time on the bandsaw, and I'm actually cutting off that second pattern because I take the pattern from one edge, flip it to the other edge, and that now allows me to have an even cutout all the way through. With putting that other piece back on, I also use masking tape to wrap that back on to hold it in position because I want to see my line. And the reason I'm using masking tape is that it allows me to see through it and it allows me to follow my detailed line there. By setting this down in place, now comes time to put the whole frame together. What I've done ahead of time is I've looked at my boards. Anything that was a good side and a bad side, I've marked an X on the bad side, which tells me that's the side that I want facing up to me right now, because we're actually building this backwards. We're building this face down, and we want to make sure we take all these pieces and line them up like so. The top, set in place, and I'm just putting all these pieces in, lining them up, because I want to make sure that I've got an exact 36 inches. The stiles and the rails, well, the stiles in this case are the side pieces. They're the vertical pieces. The horizontal pieces are all rails. So all my X's are up in position. I don't want to go any more than that. I just want to make sure that everything is there. All my spots are taken into consideration. I line everything up, and I've got 36 inches exactly, and that's where I want to be. The next thing for me to do is just to number these. So go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. Let's go 4, 4 here, and 5, and 6, and 7, 7. Now this is the K2000. Now this jig here is really helpful for this, because remember I'm using 1 1/2 inch stock for the rails. Now I set this in place, I line it up on my guides. The distance between those two holes is 9/16 of an inch, which is really handy in this case because I don't have a lot of stock here to play with. I also don't want to get the holes too close to the outside, because if I do, you might possibly see them. So this, I line it up like so, take my time, lock it in place, let the drill do the work, and follow through. Don't force it, turn the drill on and let it guide it right into the board. Now all the rails are done this way. Look at those two nice clean holes side by side. It looks really good, and it'll actually be a real tight hold. Now that's my last one. That is my center stile that I've got there. And notice the holes here are actually wider apart, because what I've done, instead of using the two center ones at 9/16, what I've done is I've moved it over. I've used the wider ones. I've used the one on the outside here to here, which does spread out the hole as well. So the next thing I want to do is take it out to my layout table. Now the layout table is just a piece of scrap ply underneath, and I've set in some upright boards 3.5 inches wide, because I'm going to use my face clamp on here. And with the face clamp, the bigger portion goes to the good side, where the smaller one goes to the back. And what that does is it makes sure that I get a really good smooth finish on the front. Even if the boards are a little irregular, that doesn't matter, because the front will always look good and the back will have the irregularity. Next thing I want to do is I want to take a little bit of glue, put it on the end grain of the board, just like that, just a little bit, not a lot, because that is really going to soak into that end grain. Take it, set it up in place like so, line it up, and before I clamp that on, I just want to make sure it's flush at top, and clamp it on like this. Take a coarse threaded screw. Now this is a 1 1/4 inch length of a screw, and the coarse thread is good for softwoods. If this was hardwood, we would use a fine thread. Line it up like so again. And once you get a couple of these boards on, this will sit nicely on this tabletop, on this layout table itself. Now this is the last one to go in place, last rail. And I'm using the spacers here again just to make sure that I get the exact 5 7/8 inch spacing I need between each drawer. I'm pulling that down into position, holding it like so. I can line that up, come underneath, and line that up like so. And running in my screw this way. Nice part about this whole process, once all this is in place, once all the screws are put in and the glue is set in place, I don't have to wait for the gluing time. I can keep on working here and keep on going. So it really saves me a lot of time, instead of waiting for that 20 to 30 minute time for the clamping and the glue to dry. There you have it, frame. Look at that. Every one of these corners and every one of these connections, just perfect, nice and smooth and really flush. Next thing I want to do is I want to take it back over to my K2000 Craig jig, and what I want to do now is I want to put some screw holes into the pocket holes into the stiles themselves, actually, so that I can now come through here. I'm going to put about 5 in, and what I'll do is I'll just eye them out. You don't have to measure them, because again, you're not going to see any of these. These are all going to be hidden once we get this all together. Now, 5 is ample in this application when you're coming down these stiles. Set this in place like so, and I'm using 2 pieces of masonite, 1/4 inch masonite, for that inset, because I want it to come in 1/4 inch. I don't want it to be flush. I want some definition there. The next thing I want to do is I want to take this angle clamp, set it up like so, drop that into the pocket hole, line up the top, and clamp it into position. Now that's going to hold it in place for my first screw to go into. Line it up like so, put this in, and pull it in tight. Come into the center board, same thing, just push down on it, and up so. Change this down to the other end now, and bring it in, and line it up like this. And once again, just press down, and follow through. Now I'm not gluing this, because I don't want that glued to that face frame. I want it kept separate, because for the swelling and contracting that's going to happen there. Put my coarse thread screws in, 1 1/4 inches long, and that's all you need for this. Even though we've got a thicker stock there, don't expand on the screws. Line it up like so, and again down to the bottom end here, line it up and push it all down, lock it in place. And the final screw. There we go. And when it's all said and done, there's our face frame attached to our legs. All that done easily, quickly, all with the Craig pocket hole jig. The next step is to build the back. Now the construction of the back is pretty well the same. I take my two back legs, lay them out, and in this case I'm going to use 1/2 inch particle core veneer. Now the nice part about this is the Craig jig works really well on this particle core, actually on any kind of ply core as well. The next part I want to do here is take it over to my jig, and I want to set this up so I want to make sure that it's adjusted for 1/2 inch material. Setting this in place, I'm going to put 5 holes down the side here. Same as I did with front frame. Lock it in place. And put in my first hole. Now you can measure down and pick the spots you want to put all the holes, but I find it just as easy doing it this way and matching it up as I go along. Now it's time to add this onto the legs. Set this in place. Take my 2 spacers again, remember 1/4 inch spacers, run them down along the side of the legs, and that's just going to be giving that little bit of an inset of 1/4 inch. Line the legs in position, and with my right angle clamp, just going to make sure that everything's flush and lock it into position. Number 8 coarse thread screw, 1 1/4 inches long. Pull that in. There, now it's time to attach the front and the back together. And in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up like so, stand this in place. Now remember, I still want to use that 1/4 inch spacer, because this piece now will set in place like this. Line up like so. Bring the other one over as well. Now you have to be a bit of a contortionist to try and do this on your own, but if there's an extra person around, it's good to have a bit of a hand. I now want to add in my clamp, my right angle clamp, and that should hold it in position. Now, I do have to make a fine adjustment on this because I was working with 1/2 inch material before, and now I am going into the 3/4 inch material. Back it off a bit. Perfect, look at that, and it holds it up in position too. Next step, again, I'm still using that 1 1/4 inch screw. Coming down, and I'm not using any glue here, okay? And the nice part about this whole project is that I don't have to stop and wait for glue up time. With the Craig jig, I can make the pocket holes, and I can just keep moving along. So building time, for me, at least 1/3 of the time it takes to build a project. Now it comes time to add the front. So the front end with the good side out, remember that. And line it up to the back, a little flush, and clamp it together like that. Continue putting the screws in. All the way down. Put the next side board on. Bring up my piece. And set it like so. And again, we're going to use that spacer on the front and the back. Clamp this in place. Make sure it's flush. That's really important here. I feel like I'm boxing myself in here. 1. Now I'll take off my clamp and put the last screw in on this end. Now move this out of the way and slide it forward, stand it up in a position, and there you have it. That's how easy it is to use the Craig jig for all different sizes of material. that the front, the back, and the sides are attached, I can now measure my bottom board for the cupboard section. Now that it's all together, it gives me an accurate measurement of the size and the width that I need. I'm also going to install a gable up the center so that I can actually put up the drawer slides on there to support the drawers. The next thing I want to do is I want to go back to my base here. I've got cutouts and they're different. Those cutouts are to accept the leg on the inside. If you notice, this front one is actually a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch, where this other one is 1/2 by 3/4. Now the reason that is because of the fact that we used 1/2 inch stock for the back. So there is a difference between the two. To cut them, I'm going to use a bandsaw, but you could also use a jigsaw to do this as well. Now, this is the bottom installed. I've used pocket holes for this as well, and again on the underside. Here's the corner we cut out on the bandsaw, and that really gives it a really nice flush finish from the inside as well. Now remember, 3/4 inch stock to 1/2 inch stock, make sure you use the right screw. 1 inch for the 1/2 inch stock and 1 1/4 for the 3/4 inch stock. Now, as far as the inside goes, I've installed that center gable. And that center gable now, what it does is it actually creates the cavity on the inside here, and it also is my side support for the rails I'm going to put in here for the drawers. Now if you notice, it's been cut down a little short. Well, that's because I'm going to be putting a sink in this one. If you're not using it for a sink and you just want it as a dresser, a table of some kind, you can bring that gable right up to the bottom of this drawer here as well. This will be a false drawer. As far as the other piece on the other side, well, I've put a filler in here of 3/4 inch stock by 2.5 inches, and I've attached it with one pocket hole in the front and a 1 inch screw at the back. Remember, the back has got the 1/2 inch stock. Notice I've kept it clear here, and the reason that's clear there is I want a good smooth area so I can attach my drawer slides. The top, well, the top is going to be, guess what? Particle core veneer. Now that can be a problem because I don't want that edge to show, so I have to dress that edge up, and I'm going to show you how to do that. To cover up the raw edge of the board, the first thing I did was I took some stock. I cut it down to 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 on the table saw. Once that was done, I picked a style of OG bit that I liked, and I put that on the top portion of the rail, which gave me a really nice detail there. Moving it down, I then put a roundover bit on the bottom just to take away that sharp edge. Once that was done, I measured all the pieces out to length, and I cut the corners at a 45. This now ends up giving me my rails that I need for the front and for the sides. I'm not going to put one on the back. The next thing I want to do is, on the 3 sides that the bullnosing is going to go on, I set a piece of masking tape down, and the reason is that's going to be a buffer for me. Because it's so paper thin that the veneer, if I over sand, I'm going to go through to the particle core. By laying that out, I take my piece now, and on my layout table, I use this again, but instead of this time long ways, I'm using it sideways. Now here's all those pocket holes I put in the bottom. Notice they're on 3 sides, the front and the 2 side pieces, not along the back. First thing I want to do is I want to add in these 2 pieces. This is my front, and this is my side. I want to make sure that it does line up nice and neatly, and I'm just going to go on a skew like this. Set it up in place like so. Make sure that everything lines up here and here. And next thing I want to do is now use the glue. Take a good generous portion of glue, set it on here because this is very porous, and this is going to suck that glue in quite well. Give it a good helping there. And try to keep it to the back of the board because it will support or end up oozing down to the front. By setting this in place like so, and this is where the 2 boards are important. Not that we're going to put that first one on right away, but I want to make sure that it's lined up. The next thing I do is I take my angle clamp here, set this in place like so, line it in, and just with a feel of my hand here, just lay that in position. Now, because I've got that distance and that span, I put that 1/2 inch spacer in here. Again, I put my face clamp on the bottom here, set it in place like so, and just like that. Now I can feel that that has basically come out to a real nice smooth finish on the front. Taking a pocket hole screw, I start off at the back corner. And I'm just going to do a few here as I go through. I'm going to add a couple in here and just go and have a look at this as I move my clamp down the board. Come back out again. And for now, I'm doing every second one. Setting this in place, I now match it up, and what I'll do is I'll continue all the way around to the other side of the board, and that'll give me my finished edge. Now, if you notice this little spacer I had in here, well, that's just to help me clamp onto the side here, because I've really got a bit of an overhang here, and I want that as a filler in there, just to help me put the clamp on. Flip this over, and there's our top with the bullnosing. Now, if you notice, I've got masking tape on here as well. And the reason I put that there was it's a bit of a buffer to try and keep that level so I don't have the veneer sticking up higher than the sideboard. Pull all that off. Don't leave it on too long because it will leave a residue if you leave it on quite a while, but if you just leave it on for a few hours, not a problem. Peel this all away, and you're all done. You're ready to go. That gives you a nice clean edge to sand up to, because remember, that veneer is very, very thin. Next thing I want to do is I want to take it over to my cabinet. And if you notice here, I've got these cleats that I've put in. A rail in the back here and a rail here. And what that does is it actually strengthens up the whole support as well of the cabinet, but it allows me now to secure the top to this as well. Set this in place like so. A little bit of an overhang there, and line it up, and there it is. That's the top to my cabinet. And that's how easy it is to bullnose with the Kreg jig. Next, by using the Kreg jig, I'm going to make a drawer. And those drawers are going to be 1/2 inch stock, and in this case, a birch ply. Now, the nice thing about this is I'm going to take it over to my jig, and I'm going to set in my 1/2 inch spacer block. Make sure it's seated well at the bottom of the jig. Take your step-down drill bit and adjust it from 3/4, which we used in the earlier stock, to a 1/2 inch stock. By securing the stop collar, that will give me a consistent hole. Next, I take my pieces, I pocket hole 3 pocket holes into this end board. The face and the back are done exactly the same. The 3 holes are put in place, and I use a 1 inch number 7 panhead screw. That puts it together, and it makes a nice tight seal with that glue in there. The next thing I want to do is I want to add my roller sliders. Now, these things are very difficult to put in if you don't have the right tool, and guess what? Kreg Jig also has come up with a very simple way to put them in. This is pretty universal, so you can take your slider, set it in place, and just pop it in like so, and it automatically lines up for you. Run it back through and just slide it into the hole and set it firmly against the face frame. By doing that, that now gives it a good 90-degree angle and will keep my roller sliders fairly straight. By taking a 5/8 inch screw, the number 6, drop it in place like so. There's the first one. And then the second one, just down the middle here. You've got it set in place, and pop it off. Next, I want to try one of the drawers. Nice fit. Next, I want to put the front on the drawer, and that's going to cover up the pocket holes and really give us a nice finish on this. Here's one here I've already done, and just to show you that face frame is put on here, I've routed out the edge on the side, and I've attached it on the inside with screws. So it really gives a nice good hold. Once that's all set to go, set it in place, drop it in like so, and there's our front. The front for the top here, well, right now I'm going to leave that as a cavity because I may end up putting a bathroom sink in here, or I may end up putting a drawer in here. But the option is that I can do that now, and by putting some 3/4 inch L brackets on here, I can set that in place, and from the back side, I can do an adjustment and line that up and leave that in there until I make my decision on that. Now the door has been made using the Kreg jig as well, but because the pocket holes will be visible when the door is open, they need to be plugged. Now what I've done here, I take the pocket hole, put a little bit of glue in it. I take a pine plug because I've used pine material. I take the mini pocket, and it's got this pusher in here that ends up taking the dowel and pushing it into place. So I set that in, flip this over, and just give it a good firm push. As you can see, the glue pops up, the dowel's in place, and it's flared out to match the hole. Once that dries, I take my palm sander to these two here. there, I've got all my plugs sanded down. Take a look at the door. Hey, looks great. Now, I'm not going to attach this yet, and I'm not going to put any hardware on here because I want to put all my finishes on here first. Well, there you have it, a completed project, all built with Craig jig. So there you have it. With a little imagination, you too will be able to create a wide variety of cabinet styles using the Craig jig. Once you start using the Craig K2000 pocket hole jig, you'll wonder how you previously built projects without it. The Craig jig creates fast, strong, simple joints. It's a must-have in my workshop. For more information or to find your local Craig tool dealer, visit www.craigtool.com or call 1-800-447-8638.